So I will tell you, it would be lovely if both the husband and the wife were together, because you'll ask each other questions, and if your spouse is not here, you won't get the opportunity to do that. So that would be my recommendation. You don't have to do it, but that would be my recommendation. مش امتحان، جواب حب. I'm just waiting for them to give me the go, and then we'll go.
Yeah, everything's on the live stream. So from the YouTube channel, Athanasius, it has. And then we're going to send recordings on our.
We're good? In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. So my name is Sam. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist. I just want to start off by telling you a personal story before we jump in. So I've been married 16 years, and on a monthly basis, my wife and I go to this marital enrichment. And typically when I'm there, from time to time, they'll have a piece of paper and I'll have sort of prompts, questions to discuss as a couple. And oftentimes when I'm there, there's like a pesky demon that comes, and that demon says to me, that's not for you. You specialize in couples therapy. What's there that you're going to ask your spouse, or your spouse is going to ask you, that's more relevant, that's more important than sort of the stuff that the speaker is presenting? And so last time I was there, it was a few weeks ago, I sort of told the pesky demon, why don't you just have a seat and let me try this out? And so I asked my wife the question that was on the prompt, and she gave me an answer. And when she gave me the answer, I just started sort of bursting into tears. And when I left, it was the most memorable part of that experience. Even though I loved the speaker, even though the content was so amazing, that experience, what she said, was so beautiful, was so heartwarming, that's what I remember from that night. So I say this to you because in our interaction together, I'm going to put up some questions for you to ask your spouse. And my experience is that there's a pesky little demon that will come to you and will say in your ears, that's not for you. Let other people do that. That's child stuff. And that's fine. You know, the Lord has given us free will. You can choose to not do it and just focus on the content that I'm giving you. But I will tell you, that will be what your spouse will share with you will be the best thing that you will take home today. My topic that I want to cover with you is attachment and Christian parenting. So we're going to cover a lot of stuff. I'll stop if you have any questions or feedback or anything else you might want to add. But let's start with talking about attachment. What is attachment? And before I tell you what attachment is, I want you to reflect on your own childhood attachment. So the expectation is that questions that your spouse will ask you might bring up difficult feelings. And that's okay. And if you need to take a break, you can take a break, come back. But be open, be honest, share only if you're willing, you know. You don't have to share like some traumatic event from your childhood if this is not the space and the time for it. Honor and respect each other's answers, right? You're not saying like, no, I know it's something different. You know, whatever answer they give you, just honor that. And then thank them for sharing that. Hey, I appreciate you sharing that with me. Thank you. You know, again, after 16 years of marriage, I'm starting to learn more about my wife's childhood as she's starting to know more about mine. It's not something that we readily share with people, right? Especially the complicated things. So here's the questions that I have for you to discuss with your spouse. The first question is, what kind of relationship did you have with your parents growing up? How did you receive love? Who did you turn to when you felt sad, lonely, scared, overwhelmed? And why did you turn to that person? So some people might say it was my grandmother, it was my neighbor, it was my mom. So talk about why was it your neighbor, why was it your grandmother? Who do you wish was more present, more aware of your needs as a child? And what do you think you needed the most growing up? So you might say like, hey, listen, I'm 53 years old. I don't remember myself as a child, what I needed. But overall, sort of, by the time you left your parents' home, what is it that you felt that you needed? This is a very vulnerable conversation. That's why I said, please space out. And I want you to spend 5 minutes on this, asking each other respectfully, kindly, lovingly, asking yourself these questions, and then we'll regroup. Your time starts now. Do you need another minute? Anybody need another minute? Okay, go ahead. Are we ready? Yeah? Okay. So when we're talking about attachment, we're talking about the bond between the parent and the infant that continues throughout life. And this attachment, the parent-child attachment, creates what we call a schema, like an inner map of how it is that you have a relationship with yourself, with others, and with the world. So attachment, it's such an important part of human development and how it is that we begin to form relationships. There was an important study done by Kaiser Permanente in the CDC between 1995 and 1997. So they screened 17,000 of their patients. And this is called the adverse childhood experience. And by the way, when someone comes to see me in therapy, this is one of the paperwork they have to complete. Always, I look at this. Always, no exceptions. So it's a 10-question inventory. And I'm going to give you some of the sample questions of the inventory. And then I'm going to tell you what does this say about attachment, okay? So here's an example of 5 out of the 10 questions. Question number 1. Did you live with anyone who was depressed, mentally ill, or attempted suicide? Did your parents ever hit, beat, or threaten to harm each other? So this is parents with each other, not you as a child, but just parents with each other. This is assessing for domestic violence. Did a parent or adult in your home ever swear at you, insult you, or put you down? And put you down could be like a subtle way of putting you down, or an explicit way. Like an explicit way of putting a child down is just saying, you know, you're dumb, you're a loser, you can't do this. Sort of an implicit way is just sort of like rolling your eyes when they talk about their hopes and dreams. You know, like, sure, we'll see if you're able to do that. Did a parent in your home ever hit, beat, kick, or physically hurt you in any way? You know, oftentimes women will say that when I was a young girl, my mom would pull me by my hair. Did you feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were special? So those are five out of the 10 questions. I didn't put all the 10 questions because the other 5 were very extreme. But here's the outcome of that study. If you scored 4 or more on that 10-question inventory, there was an increase of heart disease by 220%, stroke by 240%, diabetes by 160%. If you scored again 4 or more, you were likely to have depression by 460%, attempt suicide by 1,200%, become an alcoholic by 740%, become an IV drug user by 1,000%. So you have to stop here, and you have to ask the question, when we think about what's the greatest enemy to our children, we often don't think, oh, like the home. No, almost nobody would say that. It's them over there. You know, it's the people who want to give my children drugs and sex and alcohol, it's them. But why this study is so important? Because the study is saying the attachment, the bond between the parent and the child is what reduces the risk of addiction and mental health problems, or makes you deeply susceptible to addiction. And I've never ever met a drug addict, and for 3 years I worked primarily with drug addicts. I've never met a drug addict who did not have a childhood wound, ever. So taken from this on attachment, there's someone by the name of Dr. Daniel Siegel. Dr. Daniel Siegel is a Harvard graduate who did some work out of UCLA, child and adult psychiatry, and he coined these, what he called the 4 S's of attachment. Like, what do children actually need to become resilient, strong adults? That are courageous, that are sturdy, that actually can take on hardship and the trials of life. And this is, I'm going to go through the 4 S's quickly, and then we'll move on to other things. So here are the 4 S's. He says it's safety, being seen, being soothed, and being secure. So let's go through them together. Number 1 is being safe. And when we think about being safe, our first response is like, well, of course. You know, I'm not going to let my 2-year-old sort of cross the street by himself. I'm not going to let my, 7-year-old go spend the night at some stranger's house. Of course I'm going to keep them safe. But here, safety does not just imply physical safety, but it also implies emotional safety. In other words, I can't be the source of love and also be the source of fear, terror, and disorientation. And so I can't in one moment hug my daughter and say, I love you, you mean the world to me. And then in a moment when I'm upset, I corner her so her back is in the wall, I get in her face and I start screaming at her. And I start screaming at this little body, and what ends up happening inside of her is her body starts flooding with cortisol, stress hormone, and her brain starts to light up. There is danger. This is scary. Dad is a loving figure, but Dad is also a very scary person. And what happens when I am a source of love and a source of disorientation and pain, the child begins to develop what we call a disorganized attachment. In other words, I don't really know how to be with you, right? And you'll see adults like that. In America, 30% of adults have a disorganized attachment. I wonder if we took that poll in Egypt, what that attachment, what the results would be. But what that means is that I don't know how to connect with you. I want to trust you, but my gut feeling, again, my nervous system tells me that being close to someone could be an absolute source of terror and horror, and I can't do that. And so the disorganized attachment, the person is constantly thinking a lot. You know, you'll hear, I'll talk to people who've experienced a lot of this growing up, and they'll say, when I walk into a room, I scan the room, I know where the exit door is. I'm always like the term keyed up. I'm keyed up, I'm on edge. I can't really relax all that much. We have the choice to create that in our children, and people do create that in their children. We also have the opportunity that just like my daughter turns around and says, hey, Dad, right? She's not calling me Dad and then going to pray and calling God Dad because God is like Dad, she's actually calling me Dad because she's saying, you are a representation of God. And so when she says the Lord's Prayer, she's addressing him as Dad. And then she's saying to me, you are a representation of God. Well, if you're a father, if you're a man, that should not sit easily with you. That's a huge, huge responsibility. Huge. It's almost crushing. It's almost crushing. Because God is the ultimate source of safety. You know, how many times you've experienced like a crisis in your life, and you went home, you got in bed, you put the covers over you, and you just prayed. You said, I just want to shut out the world and hide here, but I need you to be in here under the covers with me, right? And that's the person who's experienced God as safety will do that. That God is present to comfort me, to keep me safe, to embrace me. And so for fathers, we have a huge, huge, huge challenge here. The second S that Daniel Siegel presents is that of being seen. That in order for a child to develop in a healthy way, they need to have an experience of being seen. What does it mean for a child to be seen? Right? What does it mean for a child to be seen? You know, my daughter's only 5, and she calls me out when I'm not listening. She'll say something, and I'll be like in my head or doing something, and she'll say, Dad, what did I just say? Repeat it back. 5 years old. I wonder what the conversation is going to be like at like 12 and 13. But she'll say that to me. She'll say, Dad, repeat it back. And if I missed something, she'll say, Dad, you weren't listening. It's painful. And I'll say, yes, you're right. I wasn't really listening. Please say it again. Give me another chance. But being seen means that we're building these connections in the brain that promote resilience. That means that I see what's happening inside your inner being. It's one thing to be able to say, well, yeah, I see Sam standing up and speaking to a group of people. It's another thing for you and I to have a conversation and you say, what was going on with you when you were doing this? What did you feel? What were you worried about? What were you scared of? What really moved you? That's getting the inner map, the inner world of the child, yeah? And so this is the way that we develop emotional intelligence in our children, ways that we develop empathy and compassion, is being able to tune in to their inner world. It's one thing to see that my child's sitting down trying to open a box and they can't. It's another thing to be able to know what that experience is like for them. The level in which the child is seen will predict how present or avoidant they are in relationship. In other words, I grow up, I'm 2 years old, I'm 4, I'm 7, I'm 10, and I'm somewhere in the backdrop. My parents are too stressed, too worried to notice that I'm there. And I grow up and I do what everybody does and I get married. I walk by the bathroom and I see my wife crying. And I'm like, oh, that's unfortunate. But I keep walking. Because there's no inner map that says, learn how to tune in to the inner life of the other person. I've never received that map. I just see someone else I live with. I'm emotionally disconnected from them. I want to play a short video for you to let you know how much children are tuned in right from the beginning, how much they are tuned in to you, and how much it is that they want you to know their inner world. I hope I'm able to play this.
This young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her. This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get a normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
I'm here. And what I'm doing. Oh, so big girl.
It's a little like the...
Oof. Oof. And so pre-verbal. The child wants the presence of the parent. Engage with me, laugh with me, point at things with me. I want this. I very much want to be engaged with you. And that never stops. But the child who doesn't get that is also the spouse who grows up and cannot give that. One of the other ways that we get to connect with our children and allow them to be seen is through laughter and through play. There's probably nothing more important than play. And, sadly, like growing up, play was sort of relegated to this thing about it's a waste of time. You should be studying, you should be doing something productive with your life. You're going to go and play. But we know better now. We know that play develops language skills. It helps with gross motor skills, with creativity, especially with pretend play. And I know your children are older now and they're past that stage. But it's also helpful with regulating emotions. One of the things that I always love to do with my kids, regardless of how old they are, is that we play wrestle. Because it's so good for them. It teaches them self-control, and it teaches them how the body can be safe and playful and fun and loving. And by the way, that's also connected to healthy sexuality, which we'll talk about later. But this idea of receiving physical touch in a way that's playful and fun and safe and exciting is a very important thing. So we've covered safety, being seen, and the third S is soothed. That for the child to develop, they need to learn how to soothe. And they learn how to soothe by the way that we help them soothe, the way that we are present with their pain, but you're not overcome by it. So when a child or an adolescent comes to you and they're distressed, what they're actually saying is, how do I deal with this thing that's happening with me? So if your teen girl comes to you and says, some girl at school said I was fat and ugly, and she starts crying, essentially she's telling you, how is it that I deal with these feelings of feeling judged and feeling shame and feeling scared and belittled? What do I do with this? Now, if I'm crushed by shame and judgment and being belittled, I'm going to want to run. And I'm going to want her to get rid of that quickly. So I'm going to say something like, that girl doesn't know what she's talking about. Don't even bring this up again. Just leave it alone. Don't think about this. Go tell the teacher. Go do something. But don't feel this way. And what I'm teaching her is, when you have difficult emotion, somehow distract yourself from it. Figure something to do to distract yourself. Don't actually face it, encounter it, and bring Christ into it, but run away from it. Because Dad, he can't handle that. Don't bring that stuff up to Dad. I don't want to hear that, And so I want us to be able to remember that in a loving way, when my child comes to me and says, my friend didn't want to play with me and she thinks I'm ugly and stupid, and this is an opportunity for me to say, okay, step into that pain and be a loving presence. You're not going to fix it. You're not going to take it away. But if you could be a loving presence, she'll be able to tolerate the pain and she'll be more ready for adulthood. So if you tell her, forget about it, let's go get ice cream, she's going to do that for the rest of her life. And she'll be 38 years old and the boss will say something mean to her and she'll go home and she'll say, I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to have ice cream. Not to shame the ice cream. Ice cream is great. But we do that because we can't heal relationally. So we go to food, or we go to social media, or we go, why? Because we needed someone to be there for us in a loving presence, and they couldn't. They couldn't be there for us. So in order for me to sit with my daughter's pain, I got to encounter those things in myself. When I feel embarrassed, when I feel shame, when I feel regret, when I feel belittled, I got to be able to look at that and talk about it. Talk about it with the priest, talk about it with a trusted friend. And especially for men, this is very, very, very challenging, very, very difficult. That's why if you have one friend that you can sit with and say very, very horrible things to, and they could say, hey, Peter, Paul, Bob, I love you, man. I'll see you tomorrow for coffee. That's a good thing. That's a great thing. But you need to have at least one person that you can do that with. So the child needs to feel safe, seen, soothed. And this is primarily also a gift to women. I love how in the gospel you have the apostles hiding out, but you have the three women at the cross. And then at the resurrection, it's the women who wake up early to bring spices to the Lord's tomb. And they're the first to proclaim the resurrection of the Lord. It's also the moms who are first to proclaim the gospel that God is love. You are the first person. You are the living gospel that God is love. You think about what the mother does, right? Even if the child is dysregulated, they're crying, they flare their arm and they slap mom on one cheek, and they flare their arm and they slap mom on the other cheek. And the mom takes the baby, goes, shh, and is a loving presence. It's so amazing that sometimes some of the saints will say that Christ on the cross is the nursing mother. The nursing mother. The tender parent who lovingly nurses the child while the child becomes frustrated, dysregulated, and acts out in all kinds of ways. But there's also a need for the presence of masculine affection. And I want to talk to you first about this first painting here. The painting you see up there of the prodigal son is the painting, the 17th century oil painting by Rembrandt. And I don't know if you've ever seen this painting before, but if you look closely, the father has his hand on the returning son, and one of the hand is feminine, it's a woman's hand, and the other hand is masculine, it's a male. And the artist here, of course, this icon would never make its way into our church for good reasons, but the artist here is saying that there is a tenderness, there is a loving tenderness that Christ illustrates in the gospel. And it's called for men to also have this tender gentleness in our own parenting. One author says, Jesus is not a prisoner of his position, now talking about the other icon. He kneels at the feet of each, he touches their feet, and then uses words only to make concrete what he just set as a law of love. And so Christ himself is illustrating that he could be physically affectionate in a way that's loving and that's tender. This is particularly true for men and their sons. How many men and boys have never really been embraced by their father? It's interesting because I think in Middle Eastern countries, we do a better job of this than in Caucasian American culture. At least that's my impression as a clinician. But one author wrote this about the lack of physical affection between fathers and their sons. And this is what he said. It is sad to realize that sometimes good fathers, very loving, with a warm nature, often have apprehension in expressing their affectivity, meaning their emotion, and tenderness toward their son, for fear that they could someday become effeminate or homosexual. So the dad is scared that if I sit there and I hug my kid and I kiss him, somehow it's going to become more feminine and homosexual. However, by the way, the person who's writing this is a Catholic priest who's been a psychiatrist for 25 years. He says, however, the contrary is true because some homosexual sons, in their confidential admission, often complain that their father was cold and distant with them, and that their mother was almost too good and invasive toward the son and smothered him to the point that no woman can be his woman. This son will often seek in a man the missing masculine affection. Now, I don't want you to hear this as a causal effect. This is not saying that everybody who has same-sex attraction or is homosexual was not hugged by their father. But it is saying that there is something in the father-son dynamic that should be considered and should be looked at. Here's another exercise for you. I would like for you to reflect on these questions together. This is husband and wife asking each other. How affectionate are we with each other? How affectionate are we with our daughter or son? When and how do we use gentle and loving touch? What kind of changes, if any, would we want to see happen? So discuss these questions for a few minutes, please. And by the way, some good follow-up questions was like, when you grew up, did your parents hug each other in front of you? Did they kiss in front of you? Did they hold hand in front of you? I was asking this couple, and I was asking the wife, how did you know your parents loved each other? And she said, when we were driving to church, my dad would reach out and hold my mom's hand in the car. And she remembered that from being a little girl. And I want to encourage you that we're putting this in context. Because what happens, that the child registers this. Here's holding hand, here's kissing. Yes, it's in the context of marriage. It's in the context of mom and dad being loving, and we're happy. I could tell you that whenever I hug my wife or kiss my wife, my daughter comes and joins in. It feels safe for her. It feels good. I remember one time I was upset, and I was being a baby, so I was just going to leave. And I was walking out. My daughter called me back. She said, "You forgot to kiss mom." And I said, "Oh, thank you. Thank you for the reminder." And I went and I kissed mom. But it's safe. It's safe for them. So if you didn't have permission to do that, I'm giving you permission to do that. So we talked about Daniel Siegel's 4 S's. We're going to get to the 4th one. So we talked about safety, being seen, being soothed. And so out of that comes what we call secure attachment. That's setting them up for life. Someone who has a secure attachment, their inner map, inside their deepest cells of their body, says that I'm loved, I'm helped, I'm of value, I'm important, I could connect with you without being scared, you're not a threat to me. It's not even on a conscious level, it's on a cellular level. Yeah? And so the best predictor of future outcome is having that secure attachment. And that when, we're going to talk about repair, but when we get into disrepair, right? I have a bad moment where I'm snappy with my child, and she says to me, "Hey, that didn't feel good." My daughter is incredibly emotionally intelligent. When she was still in diapers, she commented on my tone. And one time I told her, stop moving, you're going to fall off the changing table. At 2.5. And she said, I don't like the way you said that to me. She's very attuned. And our kids, they're constantly sort of scanning for safety, scanning to want to connect. Because it's biologically driven in them to be close. Their survival depends on it. Okay, just one last thing about this and then we'll move on. So again, I just want to speak to the dads for a moment. When we move towards getting it right, especially for our sons and daughters, but when we get it right with our daughter, and our daughter's 18 and says, Dad, I'm going across country to study in New York or Boston, you want to know as she's walking away that she's accepted herself as being loved as a sinner. So if someone points out something wrong with it, she says, yeah, I know I'm not perfect. I'm okay with that. That she believes she's worthy of love, she's worthy of connection, that those things run deep within her because of all the little moments that you struggle to hold your tongue, to be respectful, to be kind, to be respectful when she's not being respectful. All of these are little investments in creating a very strong woman. And daughters, sons, they need this from you. Then when she comes to pray and she says, Our Father who art in heaven, then she says, oh yes, I know this experientially, that there is a loving Father who cares for me. Just as a side note, when I was in undergrad and we take like some philosophy class or whatever, and the professor would sit there harping on how ridiculous it is to believe in God and the existence of God and so on. I was thinking back on this and thinking the most important discussions was walking between the class and the office, because sometimes the professor would slip and say something like, my dad used to say, and I was thinking about this, man, if I was a therapist then, we would not touch theology at all, and philosophy. I'd say, tell me about Dad, who was a Christian who hurt you, because that's what this is about. You didn't come to be an atheist because you sort of philosophically made your way out of Christianity, and that's usually not what happens. There's an attachment wound. The representation of God is broken, and therefore God is broken. Yeah? Okay. Here's some more reflection questions for you, if you're willing to do the work. I came out of my home, I have my own stuff. Nobody gets out of their parents' home without taking some pain with them. And the work that we have to do is, what is that pain? How does it manifest in the relationship? And how does it impact my kids? There's a beautiful saying in the mental health field is that if you do not heal your wound, you'll bleed over people who didn't cut you. And so if I come out of my parents' home with specific wounds and I don't attend to those, for sure my kids are going to experience the aftermath of that. So here's some reflection questions for you. Are there any unresolved issues with your parents that impact your relationship with your kids? And for some people, their parents have even passed away and they're still holding on to stuff. Feelings of betrayal, anger, not feeling heard or respected. And how have you made sense of this? Like, have you made meaning of this? That's a very important question, because we could live with a meaning that gives purpose What about your experience as a child influenced your relationship with your kids? Like you might think like, well, my spouse, when the kid is not putting on their shoe and you go, put your shoe on, put your shoe on, put your shoe on, and they're not listening, my spouse seems to have a way of getting them to put their shoe on without exploding, but I can't do it. I just, fly off the handlebar. Why do you fly off the handlebar? What is it about that interaction that's so painful for you? That's the stuff that you have to think about. So take a few minutes to talk about this and help each other through it. Go ahead. If you need more time, maybe raise your hand, let me know. So I have a question for you. What's it like going through these questions together? What's it like for you to go through these questions with your spouse? Yeah. So for you, there are new questions, new areas to explore that you've never been. Yeah. Anybody else? Does it feel... It should feel challenging. I don't think they're easy questions. Does it feel challenging? Yeah. They're hard questions to ask. Yeah. And I appreciate you being so courageous to do this and not run out. So, some people ran out. I expected that. Till now. You're doing good, and I see that you're bringing humor into it, which is beautiful. That's good. And you'll have these questions maybe to come back to it later and parse through it more. Okay, so when we get those 4 S's, safety, being seen, being soothed, being secure, the home becomes the launching pad when the kids leave and the safe harbor when they come home. They have roots and wings. And because you know the ACEs study, you know that the greatest way that we can protect them from drugs, from early sex, from addiction, depression, anxiety, is the relationship. Is for my child to feel, I'm important to dad, I'm respected by dad, my thoughts matter, I can speak to dad, I can speak to mom, they love me, they care for me, they respect me. That's my weapon against addiction and mental health and all that other stuff. That's my primary weapon. And the world has nothing on that. Speaking of love, since we're here, let's spend a few minutes on it. What does love mean? Because I think in a previous talk, Archie had referenced this. He was quoting someone else and says, sometimes we say, I love apples. And what we mean is, we take it, we slice it up, and we devour it. Or, I love chicken. And I take chicken, I chop its head off, and I devour it. And what I'm actually saying is that I love how it makes me feel. It's very pleasurable. But it's not like I love chicken, like I go and spend time with chicken and feed it and go. And so sometimes, love could be sentimental. But it's not that. And it's not even just an emotion. Because what we learned from St. Paul is that you can still be upset with someone, to some extent even not like them, and be loving toward them. Because it's not in the feelings. Listen to St. Paul. He says, love is patient. And so when I say to my child, for the love of God, put your shoes on, we're going to be late, and we can't leave the house because they're scattered and they're running around. Here's St. Paul saying, okay, this is a moment where you could be loving. Love is patient, love is kind, so even if I'm giving a consequence, because you didn't put your shoes on and leave in the time that you were supposed to, you will not be able to do X or Y. But I'm still kind in that delivery. And my child can get dysregulated and go, that's not fair. And I could still say, yeah, I get it. You don't like it. You're frustrated. And I'm still loving. Is not jealous. In other words, it admires. The opposite of jealousy would be admiration. Admires. Looks for the good. Is not boastful or conceited, but is humble. If I have to say to my child, I am your dad, you need to listen to me, I've already been defeated because I couldn't do that behaviorally. If I can't do it in my relationship and I have to say it, I've already sort of been defeated in some way. Is never rude, never seeks its own advantage. I want my kid to be a shining star because it makes me feel so good. And other parents say, oh my goodness, your kid is amazing. And this is a temptation for us too. Like I want my kid to come and dress as a deacon. And by the way, I remember this over 20 years ago. I was serving in one church, and in 1 week I had 2 moms. I was serving the high school youth. And one mom came up to me and she said, "Shidda hilak ba'a ma ibni." I want him to dress as a deacon every Sunday, and shidda hilak, I will work with him. And a couple days later, another mom came to me and she said, Sam, thank God our family is very well off, but I want my son to be content with whatever food we give him. I want him to just thank God for whatever, not to be a picky eater, to accept whatever food. It just so happens that the son, who's the mom, was concerned about him receiving with gratitude, is a great servant in the church today. And the other one, again, this is not causality, but it's a part of the story. And the other one doesn't really go to church. And so when St. Paul says, love does not seek its own, love is not seeking to create something in the children that are for my own benefit. You have to pursue the study because the study is prestigious and it makes me look good. You have to shine as an athlete because I like it, because then I could get, props from the other dads. When they say your kid plays good soccer. Is not self-seeking. And it's enduring. I mean, we could go through all 13 characteristics, but I don't want to take the time to do that. But it's enduring. In other words, in hard times, it stays kind and respectful and keeps what's in your benefit at hand. Not what makes me feel good, not what sort of helps me achieve some unlived dream, but keeping your best interest at heart. There's a great psychoanalyst that I really love. Her name is Alice Miller. She was a big advocate for child abuse, and she wrote this book, Thou Shalt Not Be Aware, Society's Betrayal of the Child. Alice Miller wrote a lot about child abuse, and particularly sexual abuse in girls. And by the way, the Kaiser Permanente study showed that 20% of females were sexually abused. And I think that that statistic probably holds true for our community as well, from my experience. This is what she says. A child cannot be raised to be a loving person, neither by being beaten nor by well-meaning words. No reprimands, sermons, explanations, good examples, threats, or prohibition can make a child capable of love. So, it's not, just to use a fancy word really quickly, it's not pedagogical. It's not something that you're going to teach and you're going to look at different ways of teaching this. It's not pedagogical. This is the point that she's trying to make. And she will make the point that it's ontological. It's about being. It's about being. People didn't experience Jesus' love because necessarily just what he said, because other people took what he said and wanted to throw him off of a cliff, as in John 8. And so he was an experience of love. Yeah? So she says, a child who is preached at learns only to preach. A child who is beaten learns to beat others. A person can be raised to be a good citizen, a brave soldier, a devout Jew, Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, atheist, even a devout psychoanalyst like herself, but not to be a vital and free human being. And only vitality and freedom, and not the compulsion of child rearing, opens the wellspring of genuine capacity to love. What does she mean by that? The compulsion of child rearing. It's like this relentless pursuit of changing our kids. This is what she means. Like the relentless pursuit of saying, don't say this, don't do that. Like, no, walk like this more, don't do that. That isn't the way that we're going to bring up loving kids, is what she's saying. Trying to constantly make them something other than who they are, because it disturbs us. I want to pass that slide and just say, think about this. Imagine when you brought your child for baptism Imagine at the end, you know, the instructions that the priest give. It says, like, teach them to fast Wednesday and Friday, teach them to come to Sunday school, teach them to read the Bible. Imagine if the priest did not say that. And you came up here and you said, Abuna, you're going to read the instruction for the parents. And he said, no, I have no instructions for you. Don't do any of these things. Just be. Be to them. Be to them the love of God, the forgiveness of God, the patience of God, and the humility of God. Be to them those things. And sometimes it's hard to be those things. There's a beautiful quote by Father Matthew the Poor, and I translated this from Arabic, so it's probably a poor translation, but he says, my beloved, if you find that your love is little, know that you have been forgiven little and that your sin is great. The person who has been forgiven by God becomes as one who is insane. A burning desire to serve all. He loves much because he has been forgiven much. This is a deep mystery. So what Abuna Metta is saying here is that the extent that we could be loving toward our children is the extent that we experience God's own forgiveness and love in our repentance. Well, this complicates things because it tells me that I can't just go home and sort of be that father to my child without doing my own repentance, without doing the hard work, without sitting in front of another person and saying, let me tell you these horrific things that I think and do. Let me tell you that sometimes I trust myself more than God. That sometimes I want to say, leave the kids to me. I don't really trust you because the extent that you're willing to let them get hurt is beyond what I could tolerate. And then I have to sit and face that and talk about that. Yeah. I feel like we've gone on for a long time, and I probably should pause here. Do you have any questions, comments? Are you overwhelmed? Underwhelmed? Yes. Yeah.
And this is, I think, one of the most challenging things.
Yes.
That sometimes it's very hard for you as a parent.
Yes.
Doing this and that.
Yes.
To be humiliated by it.
Yes.
Can you elaborate more?
Yeah, beautiful. So the question is, how do you stay respectful when your child is being disrespectful? And I think the starting point is, I need to ask myself is, whose child is this? And then the answer will determine what I do. It's my kid, my child. I will teach them and they better know how to talk to me. Okay? Now if you ask me again, whose child is this? Oh, my friend, that's God's child. I'm a steward. You know, I'm the full-time babysitter. But that's God's child. That belongs to God. She belongs to God. And and also on a practical level is when I hear my child saying something rude or misbehaving when I set a limit what she is saying to me is, Dad, I don't have the skills to do this moment any better. I can't turn to her and say, honey, as a 45-year-old man, I don't have skills to do this any better either. So I'm going to go ahead and yell and scream and throw a tantrum too. So it's on me. It's on me to try to do it better. And it's hard. I mean, you know, one time I stepped outside of the house and I was outside, and then I came back after 2 minutes and my wife was like, where'd you go? I said, outside. And she's like, why'd you go outside? I don't know. I was overwhelmed. You know, parenting is very challenging because it brings up so much emotions. I mean, Archie talked about this, like if a youth asks you a question and you tell them, yeah, I know, but then when it's your own child, it's so wrapped up in so much emotions. It's very, very hard. And so I have to do the work. I have to do the work. I need to see a priest. I need to see a therapist. I need to talk to a trusted friend. I need to do whatever work I need to do. And by the way, is it worth doing the work? Maybe. Let me tell you why it's worth doing the work. If I died today, right, all my patients would get a call and they'll say, your therapist died. We're going to give you a new therapist. And within 2-3 weeks, they'll have a new therapist, and I'll be forgotten. But if my children walk out of the house knowing their identity as Christians, and they get married, and they replicate something new. So let's say for 15, 20 generations, there has been suffering and abuse and lots of pain, and they replicate something totally new. Think about that as a legacy, as your legacy. There's nothing more extraordinary that you could do than to bring up a family that's a church. Nothing. Nothing you do from your 9-to-5 work. If you're a physician, if you're an engineer, if you're whatever it is that you do, you'll be forgotten within weeks. Someone else will replace you. But the legacy of family, I mean, I can't think of anything more profound than that. So yeah, it's worth, and it's all aligned with our repentance. You know, my kid challenges me. And I remember one time I called my spiritual father when I was living in Boston. And I said, something happened, and I started yelling, and I started doing this, and I haven't done that for years. And he said to me, those things are just within you that gave them an opportunity to come out. Not what I wanted to hear. I mean, that was a slap in the face. But what I needed to hear is that those things already lie in you. You know, other people are just bringing it out. So deal with it. So it's always on us to do the work. And as we grow as parents, we grow as Christians. That's the battlefield in which we do the ascetical life. And I hope in the years to come that the Synaxarium will catch up with that. So we'll read more about saints who were good fathers and good mothers and who actually helped grow the church because the way that they implanted and grew Christ in the home. That was a long-winded answer to a simple question. But yeah. If we need to take a break, you know, in difficult moments, we take a break. But always in our mind, that child is not mine. I don't possess that child. I don't do whatever I want with that child. That child is God's, and I'm a steward, and I give account for this child. And if she wants to sin and do all this stuff, that's between her and God. My job is to equip her with the appropriate skills to be able to do better. If she's throwing a tantrum, I still yet have not given her the proper tools to do better. Any questions, additions? Maybe we'll do 5 more minutes and then we'll stop. Is that okay? There's one thing I want to share with you about the difference between being and doing, presence and production. Sometimes we can begin to train our kids. Even there was a question asked before, like, how do I reward my kid when they've done something? We can sort of begin to teach our kids that my love, my affection is going to come to you when you behave good. You get a good grade, you do something outstanding, you're going to get lots of hugs and kisses and praise from me. If not now, I don't want to talk to you. Listen to this beautiful quote. And many of us think that like raising a quote-unquote perfect child should be our objective. Like they cannot do wrong things and you know. This is the same person that I love, Alice Miller. This is what she says. Perfectionism starts when love and acceptance by the parents depend on the performance of the child. Yeah? So the love and acceptance is going to depend, it's conditioned on the child performing well. And as a result, he cannot relax nor taste joy or pleasure. And you'll see most of us are kind of like that. Like if you sit down to watch a game or you do something sort of, you have this little angst. It's like your mom's voice. فيش حاجة أحسن تعملها في حياتك إن أنت تتفرج على. There's little angst. I should be performing right now. There needs to be something better than watching a soccer game, right? This comes from this like perfectionistic seed. He cannot relax nor taste joy or pleasure. He cannot allow himself to simply live and savor good moments. He abandons his true self to adopt his idolized image. So maybe going back to that mom that said, like, help my kid dress as a deacon. Maybe he came and dressed as a deacon and people were like, oh, this is amazing, you're dressed like a deacon. Oh, and mom said, oh, فرحت قلبي, I'm so happy. And he says, all right, deacon it is. If that's what it takes for me to have this love and acceptance, deacon it is. He abandons his true self to adopt his idolized image. The desire for admiration is a substitute for love. So he says, okay, mom, you're not going to love me unless I dress as a deacon. I'll dress as a deacon. Yeah, I'll do whatever. What do you want me to do? You want me to do backflips for whatever it is that you want me to do? There is an enormous dependence on admiration from others. So then you take that primary attachment and then you generalize it to everybody. That's the person who goes to work, they're always early, they're the supervisor's favorite, everything is always on time, because they need that. The validation from others is their drug. They need it. Why? Because I don't believe that you actually love me if I don't perform well. But Alice Miller says that underneath that, depression, a feeling of emptiness, the impression of self-alienation and absurdity of life lie in wait. So underneath that rigidity of performing high all the time, depression underneath is waiting for them. Because you can't sustain that. You know, you can't do that for very long. I think I want to maybe just stop here. I don't know if you have any other questions, comments, concerns. Okay, you have 5 minutes to have fun. Enjoy yourselves.
Thank you so much to Sam. You guys are hanging in, right? Yeah. Leaving. Bring out more coffee. Should like more coffee. This is wonderful. The downstairs group is almost done. They can come up. And then we are just going to do the raffle for the family gift baskets. And then we'll just do a 1 minute prayer and we'll send you on your way. You won't be out here or if you have any questions for Sam, myself, or one of your work, whatever. You have 2, 3 minutes. Oh, actually, I know what I'm going to do. While you're up here, actually, I'm going to ask you to take our feedback survey, and the other group can do it too when they come up. So, because we really want to know how we're doing and how we can better serve you and the kinds of topics and different things that you'd like to see more of. That really helps us to, because this is not just like a one-day seminar. We're trying to have this be a ministry and something that we're continuing to do together as a community. So the goal isn't just like one talk and khalas, we're done, yani. That's not our job as parents. So I want to really encourage you to share your feedback because it really, really makes a big difference for us. So that's the QR code for the feedback survey. And if you're here and you want to just take a few minutes to fill that out, you can, or if you want to wait till you get home to do that, and we'll send it out in the email as well. And Archie Mark had to step away. I know he would have loved to have been with us for the entire day. I can listen to Archie Mark talk for 4 or 5 hours, and it would not be enough. So he's just wasn't able to be there for the full length of the day, but hopefully next time we'll have him with us for the entire duration.